Hey guys, Shin here. I wanted to do kind of a reactionary video for you after doing testing on all the new Warrior changes. I did an impressions video of all the previewed stuff they did before the September feature pack, and now that I've had a little under a week to do all the testing, I wanted to come at you with my impressions of how these changes actually affect us now that I've had a chance to test them. I'm going to go down the list they've got on the wiki. If you want to follow along, you can just pull up the Guild Wars 2 wiki on your computer and just go down the list with me. Just like in the impression video, the footage you're going to see in the background isn't really indicative of anything I'm talking about. It is going to be post-patch footage, so the changes I am talking about are going to be active during it, but don't use it as a platform or a reference for any things I'm saying, because not all of my testing is going to be in this footage. Just there as something to watch if you need it. Otherwise, you can just listen. I'm going to run through these pretty quick. I've been trying to record it faster, and I keep rambling. So I'm going to focus on how these changes feel and whether or not they did what they were supposed to do. I might give a little bit of extra thought on certain things, but I kind of want to make this video quicker than it has been turning out with the audio. So, starting off with the adrenaline changes. They are doing exactly what I wanted them to do. They are properly punishing players who are misusing the adrenaline and just missing the skills, and they are properly rewarding players who use it properly and get them to land. I have had many mirror matches with other warriors where I have won because they missed their burst skills. It feels fine. It feels good. I'm enjoying the fact that when I hit, I know I'm not wasting anything, and I don't get that free extra other burst skill because I missed it or whatever. I have to actually work for my adrenaline a lot more. The decay happening right at the end of combat and draining as fast as it does, I've seen a lot of people say, oh, that seems really fast, or, oh, I don't like this, I don't like not having my adrenaline. Well, the point of that system was to prevent you from carrying Eviscerates and Earthshakers and all that at full adrenaline around between fights. I'm fine with it. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. I don't mind it. A lot of people are saying, oh, why didn't Necros get the same treatment? Blah, blah, blah. Why doesn't Life Force decay? The thing is, you can't compare Life Force and Adrenaline. They're two completely different systems. Just because they're two bars doesn't mean they are the exact same resource. Adrenaline is meant to build quickly and be used quickly. Life Force is meant to build slowly and be used slowly. Necromancers don't have the mobility or the stability that we have as warriors. They need that Life Force to stay active in combat because they can't disengage. They have to commit to that fight. Warriors, we can get out, we can pop stability, we can stay in fights for longer, but if we need to leave, we can. Necromancers can't do that. So I don't see it as fair to compare the two systems. Those are my thoughts. The adrenaline changes are doing exactly what I wanted them to do. They feel fine. If you can't land your burst skills or you're crying about this change, get better. I'm sorry, but if you are having a problem landing your burst skills, don't cry about it, get better. Next up, Rousing Resilience. The duration got doubled. Testing this out, it feels better. It slightly alleviates some of the problems I had with it before, with things like Endure Pain making it pointless because you didn't take any damage during that anyway. 1000 Toughness is a little under half of a protection boon, and 8 seconds of that I think still makes a difference. It feels like it makes a difference. This works really well for Frenzy builds, Shake It Off builds, builds that use those skills as stun breaks because it helps mitigate the fact that you are either taking more damage, like with Frenzy, or you have no stability, like with Shake It Off. I like it. It feels good. I don't have really much else to say. It makes it more worthy of being a Grandmaster. I suppose that's what I want to say. Burst Mastery, it feels the same. The change is they slightly tweaked it, so now instead of it using less adrenaline when you use a burst skill and you actually hit with it, now it uses it all, but it regenerates some. It gives you some back depending on how much you used before. It's not really a buff or a nerf. I haven't really noticed anything different with it functionality-wise, but apparently it does work differently functionality-wise. It's not really a nerf or a buff either way. I haven't noticed any major difference with it. Testing it out, it feels the exact same way it did before. Next up, Brawler's Recovery. Does it feel amazing? No. Does it feel better than it did before? Yes. Is it worth running? Yes. Is it worth taking over Burst Mastery? Depends on your build. Brawler's Recovery feels fine, but I don't really see it as being a major game changer. When I was testing it out, unless I was fighting someone who didn't have a lot of condition application, or I was running a build that had a lot of condition clearing, it didn't really make that much of a difference against builds that spammed conditions a lot. Things like Condition Necromancy, Condition Engineers, anything that had a lot of condition spam. Brawler's Recovery didn't really make that much of a difference for the builds that didn't have a lot of condition clearing as it was. The builds I tested that had things like Triple Runes or Warhorn Conversion, things like that, it helped a bit more. It was another tool I had. But with the builds that didn't have that stuff, or when I was going up against builds that spammed a lot of conditions, having to swap weapons immediately on that 5-second mark and using it defensively didn't really work. It messed with all of my other things, so it's worth running, but it's not an amazing game changer anymore. If it removed 2 conditions, then I would say, yes, this is really crazy. But having tested it, it's neat, it's worth running, but it heavily depends on your build. Next up, we got Arcing Slices changes. Those are probably some of the best changes as far as like buffs go for us this patch. They have been amazing. Arcing Slice is now a much better tool for 1vx fights in World v. World, just doing damage in World v. World. In SPVP, it's alright, but it's tied to the other problems of the Greatsword, which is mainly your mobility. You are too mobile in SPVP. If you are sticking on a point or you're trying to defend points, using a Greatsword isn't all of that useful because you end up flying off the point, or you are gimped in your ability to evade things, because if you use Rush or Whirling Attack, which are the 2 major evasive abilities of the Greatsword, you're going to fly off the point, and you're not going to be able to stay there and keep it under your contention. If you're team fighting or you're roaming in SPVP, like you're not designated as someone who stays on points, then it's fine. Then you can use it just like you would in World v. World, where you can add more damage to a fight, you can help execute people, things like that. But in SPVP, if you're on a point, doesn't really work out as well. World v. World, on the other hand, for 1vx fights, getting 2 people under half health and then arcing slicing both of them for 4, 5, 6k crits, that makes a major difference. That can help you win 1vx fights a lot more easily. And here's one of my favorite things about the change. That damage, that extra damage you get when someone's under half health, is not dependent on how much adrenaline you have when you use it. So you can go ahead, hit someone with, say, a 3-bar Eviscerate, 3-bar Earthshaker, whatever, build a little bit of adrenaline, then turn around and arcing slice them for full damage with 1 bar of adrenaline. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot more effective than it would have been before the patch, because they also reduced the cast time of it. It's a lot faster. And yeah, as far as World v. World goes, the new Arcing Slice is fantastic. It feels amazing. It's a lot of fun to use. It's a lot of fun to combo with other things. So 2 big thumbs up for me on that one. Next couple changes were on the other parts of the Greatsword. You had 100 Blades initial strikes and the Whirlwind attack strikes. Both got the damage nerfed by 5%. I haven't noticed these. I have not noticed these nerfs at all. 5% is not much. If you're really that worried about it, you can run slashing power up in the strength tree and get that nerf back plus another 5%. It's not that big of a deal. The final strike on 100 Blades, the big one that you would hit people with for finishing it, that's the same as it was before patch. You're still hitting people for normal damage on that. So, I mean, I don't see a problem with these changes. I didn't feel any difference when I was testing them out. Signet of Rage, these changes I felt. The Adrenaline passive is definitely worth using now. Way better to use the passive now than before, because A, the Adrenaline changes make Adrenaline more valuable, and B, they doubled how much Adrenaline you gain per pulse, which happens every 3 seconds or so. It's fantastic for Adrenaline gain now. And at the same time, they nerfed the duration of the boons on the active, which means you're not going to be able to move around as much. Having tested it out in World v. World, I can feel that swiftness nerf. The Might and Fury, it doesn't really matter to me. From what I tested, I didn't notice any major deficiencies in damage without the Might and Fury, but the swiftness has made a lot bigger difference than I thought. That 5 seconds means 5 seconds less of being able to catch targets more easily when you're in combat with them in World v. World. If you're using Warrior Sprint, you're not going to notice anything because you already have that speed boost, but if you're running a build that doesn't use Warrior Sprint, say the old Hamtastic build, you'll notice a mobility drop. You will notice trouble catching your targets unless you use something like Signet Mastery to reduce the cooldown of Signet Rage, or Furious Speed to have like perma in combat swiftness, things like that, or Warhorn. It makes a difference that mobility nerf is felt. I like this because it addresses our whole, oh hey, warriors are still super mobile and like People said they didn't touch our mobility, but they did. That was this change. It makes a surprisingly big difference. The nerf to boon duration and SPVP didn't really bother me. I didn't really notice it as much there. I did notice the adrenaline change in SPVP. That was a big one. But the boon duration nerf I really only felt in World of the World, and that was because of the lack of mobility. The next change, bleeding shot, aka the auto attack on the rifle. A whole bunch of stuff happened to it, and rifle actually feels a bit more powerful now because of them. This was, okay, they changed the name to Fierce Shot. It's no longer Bleeding Shot, which makes sense because the shot doesn't bleed anymore. The auto attack does not apply bleed anymore, but in exchange for losing that bleed, it gained more base damage. 22% flat damage buff on the auto attack, so that's already hurting more. Plus, now you get more adrenaline when you hit targets with vulnerability. With how fast the auto attack can go off, that's quite a bit of extra adrenaline, which means you can kill shot more, which means you can build adrenaline a lot more quickly to use for other burst skills. Rifle feels more powerful now, both SPVP and World of the World. I wouldn't really advise using rifle in SPVP unless you're messing around or whatever, or your team for whatever reason needs a kill shot warrior. But World of the World, rifle feels a lot better just from this auto attack change. It does more damage, you can build adrenaline faster. I'm happy with the change. I'm still not going to like switch to rifle or anything, but for people who do use rifle a lot in World of the World, this makes a big difference. Next changes happen to Whirling Axe, aka the offhand axe number 5. How does it feel now? As far as actually using it, it feels better, save one thing. The fact that you cannot dodge with this anymore, and the way in which they implemented the inability to dodge with it anymore feels really clunky. Before, you would slide across the ground while still using it, and it didn't really feel that bad. It felt, you know, pretty natural. Now what happens is, when you dodge, it, like, stops you for a split second, and then you do your dodge roll. It's like it has to cancel the ability first, and then you do your dodge roll. That split second makes it feel very clunky, and I don't like that at all. I don't like that inability to smoothly dodge with it. For reference, the Thief version of this also got the same treatment, so it's not like we got shorthanded in our Whirling Axe ability. Thieves can't dodge with their stolen one anymore, but it still feels really clunky when you dodge. And also, the amount they buffed it by, yeah, the cooldown reduction is nice, but the amount of damage it does, even with the 17% buff, still doesn't feel powerful enough. Also, you have to look at the fact that Offhand Axe as a kit doesn't do enough. It still doesn't do enough damage. The number 5 is better, but it's being pulled down by the number 4. The dual strike for axe number 4 does very mediocre damage and does not give anywhere near enough fury for what it's doing, at least as far as I'm concerned. When I was testing this, I still felt weighted down and gimped by Offhand Axe. It just did not feel effective enough. World of the World mainly. Like, SPVP, it wasn't quite as bad because I was doing more damage with the 5, people were clustered onto one point, etc, etc. But World of the World, it still didn't feel all that great damage-wise. Usability-wise, it didn't feel too bad because it's not that big of a difference from what it was before, but that inability to dodge while using it feels a lot more clunky. Offhand 4 doesn't do enough. It's not enough to make Offhand X strong. It's not enough to make Offhand X really all that viable, in my opinion. Next up, we got the change to the third auto attack ability on the Mace main hand. This is the ability that applies weakness. They reduced the cast time of it by 25%. After having a chance to test this out, this feels just as good, if not better, as I would have expected it to when they originally announced it. It goes faster now, you can apply weakness more often, it's fantastic for things like Skullcrack, it's fantastic for things like Hammer, Mace Shield build, it just feels better. I don't like clunky abilities, and the third auto attack on Mace did feel kinda clunky because it took a little while to wind up. This slight reduction cast time fixed that. It feels way better now. I can hit people with that third auto attack more reliably, I can apply weakness a lot more often. This will make weakness stacking with things like Mace, Warhorn a bit easier. It just feels better all around. They didn't touch anything else on the main hand Mace offensive-wise, and they didn't need to. Now this kind of completes how fast and how nice main hand mace feels, at least as far as my opinion goes. It's just nice. It feels nice. That's all I have to say about it. It just feels nice. It's a lot more fun to use. The next few changes are all essentially the same thing, just 2 different weapon block skills. We're talking counter blow on the main hand mace, riposte on the offhand sword, and parry on the underwater spear. These were all skills that would have you block for a set duration of time, and then if you were attacked during them, you would counter attack, or they would just phase out and they just acted like any other block. What they did is they normalized the adrenaline gain for all of these. So now you get 6 adrenaline if they just run out. You gain 0 adrenaline if they cancel, and they give you 3 adrenaline if you use the adrenaline rush skill, which is what the tile flips to when you're actually actively channeling these skills. I didn't really notice anything different when I was using these skills. I guess it was just a little bit of extra adrenaline if I used it when I wasn't being attacked. I didn't really have a need to use Adrenaline Rush itself. I don't really see what the purpose of these changes were. All of these skills feel exactly the same as they did before the patch. Their primary use wasn't exactly gaining adrenaline, it was for their actual blocking capability or even the counterattack capability. So I didn't notice anything different. If you've used a block weapon, there's nothing wrong with it. After the patch, it all feels the same, it all has the same usefulness. So those are my thoughts. I don't really have a yay or nay on these because it's just adrenaline changes, but if you suddenly find you can get more adrenaline out of them, go for it. Next change happened on Impale. They lowered the duration of the Torment from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. This was needed. Our Torment duration was a little ridiculous with our condition application builds, offhand sword. It was even more ridiculous with food in Robo World. This was fine, this was needed, I don't have a problem with it. Testing, I didn't really notice a massive difference in the potency of my condition builds, but it's still nice to have. Most of the time this Torment was cleansed anyway, so it's not that big of a deal, but it toned it down a bit. I haven't really noticed any major difference in how easily I can kill people with my condition builds. If you use food in Robo World, it'll bring the duration of the Torment back up to a little under 12 seconds, so it's not going to be a massive change. It was needed, but I haven't noticed anything majorly different. I think this mainly affects SPP, because I did notice I was having a little more trouble keeping my Torment on people, but again, most of the time this is cleansed, so it's not that big of a deal. Signet of Might, now that it's just a straight 6-second buff of unblockable attacks, this is really nice for the rifle, this is really nice for the greatsword, this is really nice for the axe, because those are all really fast-hitting weapons, or weapons that have an ability that hits multiple times in quick succession. Before the patch, a lot of the time you would run out of charges on Signet of Might before the actual important part, or the majorly important part of that skill hit. In the case of axe, it wasn't really that big a deal because you could eviscerate beforehand, but either way. Things like volley, things like 100 blades, you would run out of charges before all of the damage got off and your opponent would get a block off. Now, that's not the case. You can get a full 100 blades off, you can get a full volley off, you can even get a full flurry off on the sword if you were using it for that, and you don't have to worry about some of your stuff being blocked because you ran out of charges. Now it's just a 6-second buff of all unblockable attacks. It's really nice for greatsword, rifle, things like that. Testing, it worked out fine. It worked out a lot better than before the patch. Next change happened to Berserker Stance. They nerfed the adrenaline you gain per pulse. I believe they said it was like 5 full bars of adrenaline over the course of Berserker Stance before. Now it's a full 3. This was fine. Berserker Stance gave a ridiculous amount of adrenaline while it was active. I personally don't think this is nerfing Berserker Stance in the right place, but it still helps. Where I would rather they hit Berserker Stance is in its duration. I feel 8 seconds is too long to have Kandi immunity for Warrior. Drop it down to 6 seconds and I think we're good. 4 seconds is too little. 5 seconds is too little. I think 6 seconds is fine. 7, I could see some argument for it there, but 8 seconds I feel it's just too long. But even still, I think this change was necessary. I'm fine with it. I didn't really notice any difference in how well I was able to perform when I was testing it. mainly because it was the duration. I was using it defensively, not so much for the adrenaline, but it still works. I'm still fine with it. I didn't notice anything different in playstyle. The next change happened to sprint on all of our banners. Now it no longer attacks, but it removes chill and cripple snares. This change is nice, but I don't really see it being that big of a deal. The attack on sprint wasn't really that powerful. Not a lot of people used it for that. I tested this out. It's nice, but I don't see a lot of situations where you can be under so much condition application and you're moving a banner that this would really matter. I mean, it's nice, it's a boost, it's a buff, but in most situations, I don't really see this being that big of a deal. So, take it or leave it. If you use a lot of banners, if you're using, say, a banner regen build in SPVP, I suppose it'll be a buff to you, but most of the time, I find we warriors, we just resummon our banners if we have to move, because moving 3 banners is a bit of a hassle. So, depending on how far you have to go, I could see this being useful, but when I tested it, I didn't really see it being all that useful in most situations, because you're not typically going to be using your banners as your weapon. You're not typically going to be moving your banners around. When you find a spot, you typically drop your banners, and that's it. So, take it or leave it on that one. The next few changes all happened to Rampage. These changes, I did feel, when I was testing them, I could tell the difference. The baked-in Dog March, which is the snare reduction and the 25% damage reduction baseline, I could tell those had happened. It does feel more durable. It does feel like you can get around a bit more. However, it still doesn't quite feel like it can stay in the fight long enough. Yes, you get double health. Yes, you get these extra damage reduction benefits, but I don't know what it was. It still feels like I can't stay in a fight for as long as I would like with this skill, or I have to cancel it early or something like that. It feels better, but not quite where I would want it to be. You lose your healing skill, you lose your utilities. Those things are very important for a warrior. You only have your control skills on the 1 through 5 and the extra health and stability, which it's certainly still viable. It's certainly better than it was before, but it didn't feel crazy more powerful. It just felt slightly more powerful. Now, the throw boulder buff that they made, where now the projectile flies 33% faster, that I could tell definitely, and that's actually a lot nicer because you can hit people so much more reliably that one I can definitely tell. That one is definitely a buff to Rampage because it makes hitting people a lot easier. The next couple changes both happened on the longbow. Arcing Arrow had a weird combo finisher indication bug where it would show up right when you launch the arrow. It's been there. It doesn't affect anything viability-wise or playstyle-wise. It was just kind of a weird display bug. The other one, I can't say I'm familiar with what exactly was broken before the patch fixed it, where apparently the field was being created at the maximum range of the skill rather than where the missile itself landed. I don't recall that ever happening because I was always using it within that maximum range, so it's been fixed. I can't really test it, or I couldn't really test it because I wasn't familiar with what the issue was in the first place. The next major change was where Counterblow had a bug fixed. Counterblow is the Mace number 2 block. It had a bug where it would have a shorter cooldown if you activated it less than half a second before a block. Unless you were specifically using it for this bug, then you're not really going to notice much of a change on Counterblow. This was a bug fix. I couldn't really test it, so it's whatever. Before I mention the last gameplay change, I was going to mention that I've been skipping tooltip fixes and display changes in this little impression thing because there's nothing to test there. It's fixing display stuff. The final gameplay related change I didn't really test because it was another bug fix. But apparently the stage 0 heal for healing Surge was healing for more than it was supposed to, so they brought that down. As far as I'm concerned, Surge needs to be decoupled from Adrenaline and just made to heal for stage 3 the entire time. You can still have it give full Adrenaline when you use it, but don't have it be based on how much Adrenaline you have, especially not after the Adrenaline update, because it's too long of a cooldown for terrible healing amounts from stages 0 through 2. There's a reason why most, if not all, warriors run Healing Signet, because it's our most viable heal, because Surge and Mending don't heal for enough. That's the only reason. You can keep the cooldown on Surge. Just make it heal for more or heal more reliably. Make it heal at stage 3 all the time. Mending just needs a straight up buff to its healing. The 3 condition cleared is fine and dandy. The 20-second cooldown is fine, but it still doesn't heal for enough. Ironically enough, after this change, and even before this Healing Surge bug fix, Mending heals for more than the stage 0 heal on Healing Surge. I don't like our other heals in their current iteration. Defiant Stance, I'm not even going to touch. But those are all the changes for Warriors, balance-wise, in the September feature pack. Overall, I agree with a lot of them. There are a few that I was confused by, that I'm not happy with, but majority I'm fine with. Majority I really like. After testing, even more so. So, that's going to be it for this video, guys. And I will see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.